Welcome back to the Manufacturing Alliance podcast. We're changing things up a little bit. We're going away from chat and chow because we figure I'm never eating when we do this because that would be gross and you'd hear me chomping into the microphone and nobody wants that. And so we're just going back to old school Manufacturing Alliance podcast. And we're going to tell those stories of people in the manufacturing space that are making a difference and making an impact. I'm Tony DeMakis from Alliance Specialties and Laser Sales. And we do all things mold making and repair and finishing, whether it's polishing, laser welding, laser engraving, hot runner manifold cleaning, you name it, we can help you with your tooling. We also have an exclusive line of American-made laser welding and laser engraving machines for tool repair and maintenance. And that's the Alliance story in a nutshell. But today I'm excited because we have a rising star on, as named by Plastics News. She's got all kinds of other accreditations. We tried doing this interview once before, and sometimes technology works and sometimes it doesn't. So today I'm excited to have Haleyanne Freedman on from M Holland, and welcome, Haleyanne. Hopefully your camera will cooperate with us, and if not, we'll just hear your wonderful voice for a little while.
Hopefully, yes. We'll try and get this working as we talk today.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to be popping in and out because something's going on. Again, technology is not our friend. I think you and I can be good friends, but maybe better in person.
Without the interference of computers, yes.
Yeah, so, there you are for a second. That's Haleyanne, everybody. If she disappears, now you can put a face to the name and the voice. There she goes. It's going to be a fun game. We're going to get through it. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell people who you are and why we're talking with you.
Yeah. So my name is Haleyanne, and I run the 3D printing division at M Holland Company. So we're the largest plastic injection molding distribution company in North America. No big deal. But we have a 3D printing division, and it's more of a consultancy than anything else. So we work with trying to work with our customers on figuring out what is the best 3D printing solution for them, whether that's outsourcing to a company or producing that internally. We'll help them pick printers. We kind of do everything. But I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to just play with 3D printers and help people make good decisions. But that's my absolute favorite thing to do.
And how long has M Holland been doing the 3D printing?
We've been doing 3D printing for just under 4 years.
Okay. Because I know traditionally it's more of a supply company, yeah?
Yeah. So distribution and supplying materials to the space. But we also have a lot of just value added services. I always feel like distribution doesn't really encompass everything that we do.
Sure.
It's just so many things. And we have some of the most talented plastics engineers in the industry all together, on our team. So we just kind of do a little bit of everything.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, you have to start doing new things, right? And doing different things because you never know when there's going to be a supply chain issue.
Yeah. When especially in the last year, we had such a bad supply chain issue with, COVID, and that was, metals and anything that came from, Asia was a problem. And then all of a sudden everything in Texas happened and that just made it worse.
Yep.
So it's been crazy, but in 3D printing, we fortunately have the ability to solve a lot of those problems for customers, but it's just trying to get over that educational barrier of understanding like, hey, this is totally a viable production manufacturing, a totally viable manufacturing process for production. And, this is totally something that we could use to solve some of these problems because there aren't supply chain issues nearly as severely in 3D printing. So, I just kind of hope that we can start to use that as a genuine solution moving forward in the future.
So why is that? Why is the supply different for 3D plastic or resins versus traditional resins?
Mostly because they're pre-processed and they require such a lower volume in order to meet production production quantities. So the like polypropylene is a great example. We already had plenty of polypropylene that was ready for 3D printing, as it stood. And then when we, went to try and sub in for those, the plastic injection molding shortcomings, we were able to just immediately supply, like we could produce hundreds of thousands of parts, for production applications with 3D printing because that material was already there. So once it's there, it can't be reallocated anywhere else because it's pre-processed to be compatible with 3D printing.
Sure.
But we also need like 10% of the material that the injection molding world needs in order to make the same kind of parts.
Sure. So you're enjoying the 3D printing. 3D printing is so cool to me. We just had some parts made. It was a personal thing. I was doing a charity event where I had to dress as Spider-Man. And so I had a guy here make me a mask, a 3D printed mask that goes underneath the mask. And it was so cool to see how quickly he was able to get that done. It's not totally comfortable, but it worked.
Yeah. I mean, I've got 9 of my own 3D printers at my house.
Do you really?
Oh my God. Yeah. I live and breathe 3D printing. I wish I had, additional hobbies, but I just love 3D printing and, I'm just kind of a maker at heart. And I can produce, anything I want to in my own house or, for myself or, even professionally within, a matter of hours.
Sure.
And it makes it so much more fun. I 3D printed most of my Halloween costumes the last couple of years.
Ooh, what were you?
Well, that was funny. You brought up Spider-Man because I was actually Spider-Man. I 3D printed one of those little, silly string shooters so that I could, spray people with my silly string web. And then the year before that, I was Cruella de Vil. So made the whole hat and, all the pieces and, things like that. It's just fun.
If we would have talked sooner, I would have asked you to borrow those web shooters. That would have been awesome.
They were so much fun because people can't get mad at you if you squirt them with silly string.
They can, and it just means they have no sense of humor.
Oh, exactly.
So what's the coolest thing? What's the best thing that you've made 3D printing, whether that's personal or for work?
Ooh, that's tough because of course the coolest things that, we 3D print, we're never allowed to talk about. I feel like that's all of manufacturing. But I'd probably have to say, and this is going to sound really ridiculous and it is going to be a fun application, but I made really, really cool eggs for Easter this year.
Oh.
For a local shop, and I made them exploding eggs. So when you could fill them up with things, and when you'd squeeze them, they just completely blow up, and you'd be able to. They were like hybrid weapons and also giveaways. But they were really fun. But it was an interesting engineering challenge to figure out how exactly do you make a 3D printed egg that explodes and can print in under an hour.
Yeah. So you were able to print it in under an hour, because that was the one thing that I realized is how long it takes to 3D print certain things. I mean, it could be a long process.
Yeah. And it just kind of depends on the parts that you're trying to print. Anything larger is going to take a long time. But, we also have printers at M Holland that are like 4 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet. So that's quite fast, in printing large parts. But it kind of comes down to parameters. So I mean, when I first started out with just the egg and they were, 4 inches tall, it was about a 6-hour print. And I really, worked on the parameters and, refining them because they were just kind of a fun project that I didn't want to spend 8 hours each printing, and was able to get them down to an hour. And I mean, they looked awesome. I was looking around to see if I had any that weren't broken and exploded in here, but all of the ones that I have in here, I've already exploded. But yeah, it was just really fun. It's just kind of one of those things where you don't know that you need like that skill to make an egg explode. I'll be able to apply that in some application for one of our customers at some point, just because that's just how it works. Any weird thing that we figure out, we end up applying in a significant way somewhere.
Of course, everybody needs exploding eggs. That's one of the things that people are looking for on a regular. So I'm going to jinx it, but I'm going to say it just to warn you. Your camera is working now. God. So yeah. I feel like I should tell you that, right? Like I don't want you to start flipping off the camera or anything, just because you're frustrated not knowing that it was going. So you're on. We can see you. Everybody can see who you are now, and it's great. So how did you get into the manufacturing space?
So I tell people it's half intentional and half accidental, because I had no idea what I was signing up for when I got into 3D printing. And I honestly didn't even really know what 3D printing was or capable of. But I was working with a machine tool manufacturer and was trying to get into, CNC machining and into sales engineering for just general subtractive tooling. And there was a company in Wisconsin that I went into, and, very traditional machine tool type company, the guy who owned it, exactly as you would probably imagine a guy in Wisconsin who owns a machine tool company would be. And, my interview was kind of unconventional, just kind of talking through my background and my capabilities and, just all the things that, I've done in the past and why I wanted to get into machine tools. And then he basically told me, well, I bought all these 3D printers a couple months ago because my son told me that it was something that we had to get into, and I don't want to know anything about them. I don't want to figure them out. I have too much to do. If you can figure them out, you can run the department. I was like, well, how hard could it be? And it was super hard.
Well, yeah, it's super hard, but how's that for an introduction to it, right? Like, I have this, I've already invested in the technology. It's something new. It's something upcoming. If you want it, it's yours. Run with it.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it was, I tell all of our new employees, because I tend to now lean towards people who don't have a 3D printing background, because we don't have bad habits to break. And, they get trial by fire, and it's the best way to learn. I just sat there and broke the printer repeatedly for just days and had to figure out how to fix it because no one was going to help me. And now I have 9 of my own.
So when you say bad habits, what are you talking about, bad habits? Because we go through that. I mean, I think every manufacturing company has that, where they think you can't teach an old dog new tricks. There's habits that are ingrained in somebody. It's how they learned. What are the bad habits that you refer to when it comes to printing?
So it kind of depends, because there's the whole element of design, right? So all the design constraints are different. Draft is bad for 3D printing, and it's amazing for injection molding, and all of those different concepts. But some of our best advocates within M Holland Company who work here are some of our oldest employees who have been here forever, but they just understand it. But the mindset that people will get about traditional manufacturing is, this is the only way, this is the way that we have to produce it, or 3D printing is just a fad, or it can only produce these, small components, or whatever it might be. More than half of my job, for the last almost 4 years has been just teaching people, even within our company, why this is something we have to care about, why this is something we have to keep our eyes on, why this is going to be, a big impactful technology over the next decade. And it's really hard for people to arrive at that, understanding that, oh, this is totally going to be high volume. And this is the scalability of this, business, and the potential that this has to bring us as a plastic company, or to bring, the molders in a big way. All my customers, that I work with will have to talk through, what is the technology? What can it be applied to? Because there's a lot of, just misunderstandings like, oh, you can 3D print everything, which you can't. You just can't. You cannot 3D print everything. But it's also, it's more expensive per piece, but you don't have a tool, so there's just a lot of nuance that you have to, understand. And, our laboratory technician right now, absolute best laboratory technician we've ever had. And she started about 6 months ago, and she was a flight attendant for United. And we got her because of the layoffs. Before her, we had 3 degreed mechanical engineers in that position who did not cut it, just couldn't do it. And she walked in and is unbelievable, understands all the technology. We just took her to AMUG, and she, if she told everyone she was a mechanical engineer, everyone would believe her. Everyone. She gets it. And that's where we've seen so much success.
There's something special about that, where, I think people feel like the manufacturing space is kind of closed off because they have this thought that it's hard to get into, that you have to be an engineer, that you have to have that background. But I feel like it's unique in that if you have creativity and you're willing to learn something and you're curious, you have an entryway into it. I mean, especially this newer generation of workforce, where they're used to computers. I mean, my son is 14 years old. He's taking CAD classes he's 15. Sorry. He's taking CAD classes in high school, and he's learning how to do all these things. He's already 3D printed his first piece. So I think that barrier to entry is disappearing very quickly.
Yeah. And I mean, we knew that was coming with, all technology, because I still remember looking in the phone book for people's phone numbers when I was growing up. And nobody in high school now even knows what a phone book is.
No.
And, and I get constant requests. My mom's a middle school teacher, and she's, always asking me, oh, can you talk to my classes about 3D printing and, all these different things, because everyone's getting into it. And it's totally the best way, especially with, learning from home and stuff this past year. It's such a creative way to think about, producing a part. And it's kind of easy to understand once you, under the basics of the mechanics, that, anyone can really start to apply it. And once you have an interest in it, anyone can be an engineer. It's just problem solving. It's just being creative, problem solving.
And problem solving is what we all do in manufacturing, right? There's a problem and you try and figure out how to get to that correct solution. One of the things that I found interesting, I went to the molding conference. It was a few years ago, and they had a whole day dedicated to 3D printing and, farms and, plastic labs and things like that.
Yeah.
And to me, the mistake that everybody was making is the speakers were talking like they were going to take over plastic injection. And like they were, it almost seemed like it was an us versus you kind of a thing. And I keep trying to tell people that's not what it's for. Like, my opinion, and you correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to like caps and closures or things like that, where you're making millions and millions and millions in parts, that doesn't seem like a profitable solution for 3D printing.
No, and it's not, and it's never going to be. And I mean, starting out with, representing a specific machine manufacturer and everything like that, the mentality of only 3D printing people is totally problematic, because they absolutely have that whole, we're competing because you get that whole, you guys aren't as good, you don't have as production viable applications, and it's just toys. So it's almost like a defensive reaction where everyone's like, we're going to take injection molding down. And then we're sitting here in the middle of all of it. And we've got, we have no benefit to converting an application to 3D printing that doesn't make sense, because we're competing against ourselves. So we only do it when it makes sense. And I'm sitting here, I'll give speeches at the 3D printing events that are for 3D printing people. And I'm like, stop telling people this stuff, and stop, setting these unrealistic expectations. And then I'm turning around and talking to the plastics industry saying, like, you have to care about this, and here's where it fits. So the numbers are getting higher where it makes sense, because material costs are coming down and adoption costs are coming down, and it's becoming a lot more affordable on a larger scale. But those numbers are never going to be in the millions. Like, we're talking about a capping out at like 500,000 maybe.
Right.
Because it's a balance with the tool cost. And you still have failures, and you still have all these other factors to take into consideration, but it's not intended to replace, all of injection molding. It's intended to supplement, where custom molding, we can't produce products in an economic way that are, 500 parts. If somebody just wanted to come out with a part that was 500 pieces, they'd have to charge so much money, because that tool would be 20, 30, whatever $1,000. And, that just doesn't make for an economic launch. But even large companies, they can come out with new products and trial them with 3D printing production. And then when they hit quantities that make sense, convert it to injection molding. There's so many things that can be unlocked with it, but I cannot stand when people are like, oh, it's going to take over injection molding. It's like, no, just a little piece, just a small bit.
Yeah. And I keep trying to tell people the same thing, right? Like, it has its place. Like you said, it's the small volume. Like, if you're trying to do proof of concept or get investors, or you need a short run, perfect. It's ideal. But over the long period, you're going to want to talk to a mold builder and have a design built. And, if you have that finished part that was 3D printed, you can bring that to them, and you're in the right ballpark. It's a good stepping stone. I think that's the way I envision it.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally everything you were just saying, but even in quantities, like with some of our customers, when you have to hang on to a mold for like 7 years for a certain component, and you don't want to do that because that sucks. And then you have to always refinish the mold and remake it, or, service the mold or whatever it is. that's a great fit for 3D printing. Or, entering the market with, 50,000 parts, or, whatever it is, that's where it belongs and where it's going to stay. But trying to get the companies that are servicing those mold applications as injection molders, I'm concerned for them. And I tell them all the time, we've lost jobs in injection molding that go to 3D printing. And there's nothing you can do about it because you can't be cost competitive. So you might as well jump on the train and get your own 3D printer so that when that comes up, you've got a space to compete. You understand the technology so that you can retain that business. Because even existing injection molding applications sometimes get converted. And that's where it's going to, start becoming more and more common as those quantities do hit higher and higher. 5 years ago, the quantity would be about 10,000 to 20,000 parts per year where it made sense. And it's just getting, higher and higher and becoming just more economical to approach that as a solution.
So right now, I mean, there's a lot of people. I don't think I don't think everybody's going to have 9 printers like you do. But I think it's becoming a technology that is more and more affordable for people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. The patent expiration in 2015, which was the most significant advancement, in my opinion, in the last decade for 3D printing. When those patents expired, you took a machine that you'd have to pay a minimum of $35,000 to, get into, and you're able to produce an industrial 3D printer for $5,000.
Wow.
$5,000, and for a company that's spending millions of dollars on injection molding machines, that's nothing. That you can put that on your credit card. It's totally affordable. I mean, if I, as a person, just as an individual, can have 9 3D printers, and I'd consider probably 5 of them industrial, and I have enough applications to fill all those things with parts. I mean, every company's got applications, and it's just so affordable. It's so inexpensive to get into now, if you buy the right thing.
All right. So we've got a question here from Richard Evans. He says, any recommendations on an affordable 3D printer for someone interested in just experimenting?
I have tons of recommendations for you. But it is very application dependent. So it kind of depends on the size of the part you want to print. If you want to print just tiny little form fit, test parts that need to have really accurate fine features, you can get a small DLP machine for like $1,000 that will produce really great parts. I wouldn't suggest that you put them in an airplane or anything that, super critical from that technology. But like the Ultimakers, I have 2 Ultimakers. I love Ultimakers. Very versatile. If your parts fit in about a 12-inch cubed build volume, and you want to print with thermoplastics, those can do like 85% of applications. They can print, everything up to a polycarbonate, carbon-filled materials, fine features. Very, very versatile printer, and those are about $5,000. I want to say they're like 5,500 or something like that. But just super versatile printers, and you can do 2 colors. You can do just all these different things. But if you need to print any large components, just come talk to me, and I'll give you some other recommendations, because that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, well, and you really have to know what you're doing. If you're just playing and experimenting, and you can even get them cheaper. I know that one of the guys that we have working for us, he just started tinkering. He bought a smaller machine, and it's worked for parts that we needed for certain things. And it's just so cool, because as we're building the laser welding machine, right, there's different components that we think, I wonder how this would actually fit on the head of the machine. It's going to be really expensive to go have this machined and built out. So we'll print the parts that we need and assemble the laser welding head so we can move things around, adjustments, and just make sure that everything fits the way that it's supposed to before we go and spend the money on actually building stuff out.
Yes. So, I mean, I would recommend that if you're a company, don't buy a $150 printer, because no, just don't, please.
Just don't.
They're
just don't. Just no.
Finicky. But yeah, you absolutely have to know what you're doing and looking for. I've talked to some of the largest companies in the world that have spent millions of dollars on printers, and then they talk to us and say, why can't we print any of the things that we wanted to print? And it's like, well, you don't know enough about the industry. This industry is kind of nuts.
Right.
And a lot of the people who are in this industry are kind of nuts, like me, who have, no other hobbies and lives in a 3D printing room. So it's different, and you can't always trust what you see or hear at trade shows because, they print their best parts, and that's not what's, genuinely possible. All the knowledge that we have in our consultancy, is a combined like 30 years in the 3D printing industry, understanding every company that's out there, what they really can do and can't do, and what the capabilities are. And I mean, that took a lot of practice and
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of experience. So, I mean, Googling the best 3D printer, don't do that.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
gonna help.
that's like anything else, right? I mean, it's based on people's thoughts or marketing jargon or whatever. One of the things that we hear all the time when, because we have laser engravers that we sell, and people will say, I just type it in there and I'm good to go. Well, you have to have some design experience based on what you're trying to do. It's an easy application for people, but everything's not just built in there for you. You have to have some design experience. You have to play with it. You have to get some knowledge base. It's not just you plug it in and you can make anything you want.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what a lot of people at M Holland before I got here thought. That you just tell it to print something and it just magically knows. But no, you have to be able to at least CAD or download an existing STL file. It does need some expertise.
Yeah, and I think people are just slightly naive to it. It's not a bad thing. It's just that, so many people are told, oh, it's so easy. You just upload it and go and you have your parts. But there's extra work that has to be done to that. Yes,
and they do break. And they have problems, and I have, lots of parts everywhere in this office because, heads blow up, and it's not very easy to fix unless you know what you're doing. Like, I can do it in 20 minutes. The first time I did it, it took me like 4 hours. And that's like the first roadblock when people get their printers. They're like, oh my God, my print had fluttered or blew up, or it's printing in thin air, or, whatever it is. And it's like, that's going to happen. That happens to any machine, laser cutters, whatever it is. Machines fail, but you have to be equipped and, experienced enough to know how to address it and how to fix it if you want it to be a truly production process. But if injection molders said, we're not going to adopt injection molding because we can't just press a button and have it work 100% of the time, that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, the technology would have never started.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we get very interesting objections like, well, I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to have to experiment with it. And it's like, ooh, imagine if you had said that, 20 years ago when you were buying your injection molding machine.
Well, yeah. And there's tons of issues that can happen with injection molding machines, whether it's, manifold flooding or, water lines or whatever. There's a million things that can go wrong, and there's maintenance that has to be done with that as well. So with M Holland, what are you guys primarily selling? Are you selling the creation of parts? Are you selling the materials, the machines? What's the goal with M Holland and 3D printing?
And that's like the hardest question for me to answer because it's like everything. We started out with material distribution because that's our core as a business is, just distributing materials, and we do that really well. But what we found is, we have this unparalleled access to 5,000 molders in the industry. So we know what they want to do. We know what they're trying to do. We've got all of these suppliers on the injection molding side that are producing these materials for 3D printing that are totally groundbreaking and, making these big differences in adoption. And so we looked at the industry and said, we can't just sell materials. It just doesn't make sense because almost all of our customers haven't even figured out how to adopt 3D printing. How could we possibly distribute materials to them if they don't even have a printer? So we started looking at, okay, how could we get machines to test and evaluate and make recommendations for them? Because on the 3D printing side, a lot of the perception from people who are in 3D printing is that like everything's a bad application. It's got to be this perfect optimized tool jigger fixture, and that's all they want to print. And that's just so wrong because it's such a capable process that could be doing all these great things in plastic. So we ended up building a laboratory. We've built 4 laboratories now because we kept outgrowing it. But we now have this big laboratory in Chicago. We have lots of printers that come in and out all the time. We have as many as 65 at any given time.
Wow.
All technologies, and we're constantly testing them. So we'll feed back material data, corrected technical data sheets, because we all know we can't always rely on technical data sheets.
No, you can't.
So we'll produce that data, and we'll do application development. We'll support on design. We'll help pick printers. But then the end goal for us is, we want to either produce parts for you to help you adopt it in a way that, you can expand your capabilities through M Holland and say, hey, I can save that job. I'm going to contract manufacture it through M Holland while I adopt the process.
Yeah.
And with the end goal of them adopting it themselves, and then, purchasing materials from us is, the hopeful goal.
Yeah. And that makes total sense. I've talked to some companies, and we're going to move on with that one. So I think it's awesome that you were named one of the rising stars from Plastics News. How did that happen?
I'm not really sure. I didn't know I was even up for, that award. And then I was told that I won it. It was really cool. Just because this is something I'm passionate about, and I would do it anyway without being, recognized for it. And there were a couple people from my company that were recognized as rising stars, which in plastics is cool. There's not a lot of young people in plastics anymore. The world is increasingly anti-plastic, and the problem with having young people working in this industry is pretty big. Most of our technical development engineers are retiring in like 10 years. Most are going to be retired.
That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem all across the spectrum. And one of the things that makes me totally crazy is when people, I try to avoid being political, but when jobs reports come out and people say there's no jobs, there's no jobs, there's no one hiring. And I'm like, are you crazy? I mean, if somebody's willing, I feel like I can get them a job in a day. Same
thing. I'm constantly telling people, like, explore manufacturing. It's the best thing ever. And we need people. And like I said, our best people have come from completely different industries, and they're so talented and so good at what they do. But, I'm in Women in Manufacturing. I'm a board member of Women in Manufacturing, and then I'm the national chair for Women in 3D Printing. And I am just so outraged that I was not taught that as a child, that this was a career path that I should explore. It's like, doctor, lawyer, whatever else. And nobody's talking about manufacturing. I grew up in California, so there's not as much manufacturing in California. But I mean, it just wasn't presented as an option until I was, a young adult. And then I was like, oh my God, that's totally where I belong. Like, why did nobody bring this up? But it's just nobody's talking about it as these, amazing opportunities and glorifying it as fun and creative as it is. And we have a materials engineer who just graduated like this past Friday. I've never found somebody who is so passionate about polymer science, who is, in his early 20s, and he is so good at what he does. He's just unbelievably good at it. And it's like, we need more people like that to get involved in manufacturing and 3D printing and all these different areas. Or we're going to have a really big crisis on our hands in a decade, like a really big crisis. It's
going to be huge. It's going to be a terrible problem. I mean, I look through like the landscape of our shop, and they're all good guys, but they're on the upper end of their career. And, I like what you're saying. We have an interview with a gentleman named Gaylord in a few weeks, who is running manufacturing classes and actually doing placements for people in his class to companies that are hiring. And that's like one of the perks of being in his class. So when you're saying that, and I'm just going to ask because I don't know, that you weren't presented with the information, do you feel like that's just because of the fact that that people look at manufacturing as a bad thing? Was that because you're a woman and they thought that you don't want to do that? Because I know there's an emphasis on getting girls involved in STEM instead of just getting people involved in STEM. And I think both of those are very important. What has your experience been as far as a woman involved in manufacturing?
Well, I mean, I think the problem is all of it. We had an engineering like track that you could go on at the high school I went to. There was one girl in that program, and it was just unbelievably imbalanced. But we kind of
why is that? I don't want to interrupt you, but why is that? Why is there only one girl? Why are you the only girl that's in that class? Is it? I don't know. I mean, my daughter, she likes that part of class. Like, she was very excited about doing that stuff. But are girls less interested in it at a younger age, or are they just not encouraged?
I don't think that they're taught that it can be as cool as it is, because
Okay.
it was always, if I would be interested in, something that was, making or something along those lines, it was regarded as arts and crafts, not engineering, possibilities. Even though I was building all these crazy things as a kid, it was, that's her crafts, not, she should
Sure.
be, designing and, doing all these different things. But then even in high school, your mindset, when I think about my mindset when I was a senior in high school was, oh yeah, that's boring and dirty, and I don't want to do that, because that's all that you're taught, is that
Right.
it's just filthy and you're going to be covered in oil and grease all the time.
Right.
And that's all that manufacturing is. So I think that it's the general perception of the people around you. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked for a natural bread company. So it's not like I had manufacturing people in my family.
Sure.
Unless you have that direct connection who's sitting there evangelizing and telling you like, oh my gosh, it's amazing, you have to do this, then you're really just presented with the options that are put in front of you and the opinions that people are telling you that you have.
Yes.
And that's part of the problem. And then even as a young adult, looking at these job opportunities, I was applying for these jobs that I was totally qualified for technically. I had the design background, I had all those things, and I was applying for these jobs. And I would even talk to these, some of these recruiters, and they'd say, well, we think we want you to start out as an inside sales engineer. And I'm like, I am not an inside sales person. Why are you trying to put me as an inside sales engineer? Like, I should be able to, be out there and talking to people, and that's my strength. And, they'd try and put you in a minimized position or, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they don't even realize they're doing it. Nobody's saying, women suck, let's put them inside. It's
Right.
just
Right.
natural. And it's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the recruiters don't even know what manufacturing. They may be recruiting for it, but if they're looking at you, somebody that has a passion for making and all that, and they're like, oh, you should be a salesperson, you're a girl. Like, that's not great. But I think like in grade school, I don't necessarily think it's male, female centric on who's being told about manufacturing. I just honestly don't think that they're teaching kids what it goes into, like how to make things, what that looks like, that it's an option. Like you said, that they're focused on the big, doctors, lawyers, whatever, anything other than manufacturing. And I don't get that.
Yeah. And I mean, even people, we had an experience not that long ago. Like I said, I'm very passionate about, women's organizations and all those things. And we had this discussion where people were saying, well, M Holland's not really in manufacturing. I was like, what do you mean we're not in manufacturing? Like, we literally make stuff. But also we're like a huge part of the manufacturing supply chain. And it was coming from, somebody in a human resources department who was saying, oh, well, that's just not what we do. It's like, so even people who are in those positions who deal with M Holland, who know that they buy industrial, things from us for their manufacturing supply chain, don't even view, people who are totally in manufacturing as manufacturing people. And, as a woman in that, it's like so frustrating, because then when you're looking for support or, allies or, whatever you're looking for within that industry, and people don't even regard it as manufacturing or, something that's significant, that makes it really, really hard to, relate to your colleagues and, get the support you need. Because if you want to be a woman in manufacturing, you totally need support. It's hard.
Oh, I can imagine. I think if you're trying to be involved in manufacturing at all, but that leads us to a good segue there. Tell the listeners a little bit about your position as the vice chairman in Women in Manufacturing. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I got started doing that with a colleague of mine who works at CLA, and she was really passionate about trying to get this chapter revived of Women in Manufacturing. And I was, sitting there going like, why don't we have this chapter in the Midwest? Like, we need to restart this, because I'm sitting in the middle of all these manufacturing companies and there's nothing. And so we decided to restart it. Now I feel like it's been almost 3 years ago. We restarted that chapter and built it back up. And, started getting the women, back involved. And so we'll coordinate all types of different events that, our mission is to support, promote, and inspire women in manufacturing. So We want to support the existing women in manufacturing and, inspire them and give them support and resources to further their careers and stay involved. But then also to inspire, the next generation of women that will be coming into manufacturing and doing what, I felt wasn't done for me, sharing that this is super cool. I think that young women need to see people like me and like my whole team. My whole team was very intentionally female dominant. I hired my whole team and we're majority women. And, it was a little scary at first knowing what they were going to go through, in this industry, but it was also awesome, to be able to empower them and to provide that support and have them become, evangelical about this, this industry. And so we try to get as many people involved and inspired as possible. And I would love for, people in high school or junior high or whatever to see people like me and all the women on my team who are, young and I don't want to say I'm cool, but I mean, it's different. It's people.
Come on, look at you. You are cool. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm the cool person with all my 3D printers, but that
I think it's
relate
cool.
to, and it's hard to relate to, people that you can't see yourself as being one of those women, and so that's really what we try to stand for, and what we try to represent. And so everyone who joins our team, male or female in the 3D printing department, they immediately are involved in women in 3D printing and women in manufacturing. They have no choice. They have to, because that's just
how are the men involved in women in 3D printing?
They are allies. There are not very many women in 3D printing. And we have the men on our team are just we couldn't have better men on our team. They are supportive, and they can recognize when we're experiencing something that we should not be having to go through.
Sure. And
it makes a big difference when we were at AMUG last week, the first in-person conference in like a million years. And
right.
It was scary. It was scary to be there.
Really?
Oh my God.
Why was it scary?
Because we were about 75% of the women at the conference. There were 4 of us, and I took a picture of everyone around us. It was like all male. And, and people have kind of forgotten how to talk to one another, I think.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying. They made, jokes. We were all harassed at some point, during the week. And that's not something we usually publicize, but it's all something that all women in manufacturing know. Oh, I'm going to a trade show. I need to drink water. I need to keep my hand over my drink, and I need to keep myself safe, and I can't go to the bathroom by myself. Like, those are just the rules you have to set for yourself, because it's terrifying when you're in a sea of all men and, you stand out and it can just be really tough. So I'm really glad we have such strong allies in our group that, can defend when they need to defend, or, just be the person that's there and, not contradicting when we're saying, hey, we've got to apply some kind of change to this and industry and,
right.
More comfortable for women to be a part of. And we're really lucky to have found those types of people to be on our team.
Well, listen, I'm not officially on your team, but I'll be on your team.
Awesome.
I promise to, if I see you out at the trade show, I promise to get you a glass of water. I'll even put a lid on it with a straw, so you don't have to worry about it.
I would say we're going to accept drinks from other people, but
yeah, I mean, because that's terrifying all the way around, right? Like, I have a daughter. I don't want her to have to deal with that stigma or that issue in any regard. And for me, at the we'll go to the AMBA or the Amerimold conferences or whatever they are, and it's typically, like you said, a sea of men. But I'll say that all the women that are there are welcomed and looked out for. I've never seen anything that was risky or dangerous or questionable in the least.
Yeah. And I mean, it's gotten a lot better too. And that's what I try to tell people. It was weird to come back when, and I think a lot of the people who were allowed to travel, it even limited diversity even more. But it's been really nice that, when there are outwardly, unjust things, if I said loud enough, get the hell away from me, there are going to be like 10 people that stand up and, help you fight. But, which is not how it was. We still have issues where, women will report sexual harassment and they have to be terrified for their own positions, or, terrified, if I bring this up, is this going to jeopardize my career advancement or my board involvement in some of these organizations. And even I go through that as somebody who's very outspoken about women's, things. I've gone through that when I've had to report sexual harassment, because it sucks way more, no matter what, for the woman every time, because they are the one who still has to get questioned about it. Do you have enough proof? Do you have, witnesses? Do you have all these things that you're like, no, I didn't pull out my phone when, this was happening. Of course not.
Right.
And, there are so many people who are willing to stand up and, be the change that we need, which is awesome. And, just continuing to talk about it, like, hey, remember, we still need help all the time, because it's so scary to, go anywhere by yourself at these types of conferences, is what makes those people understand that, like, hey, that person looks like they're not really super comfortable with that guy continuing to get closer and closer to them. I should stand up and make sure they're okay. And that's how I know we're headed in the right direction. That's how I know we're starting to impact change, and we're starting to make it, people aware enough that, no, it's still a problem. And, we've still got to support the women who are going through this.
People suck. People are pigs.
Yes, they do.
I mean, let's just be honest. They are.
Yes.
But the good news is, like you said, I think it's progressing. It's getting better. As more and more women are at these events and at these functions and being parts of companies, men have to recognize that and see them and everything.
And listen. Yeah. That's the biggest thing you can do, is don't sit there and don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt in those circumstances. The worst thing you can do is give whoever you're complaining about, just sexually harassed or, whatever it was, they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt. You need to listen and believe the women who are telling you, because I, in this position, shouldn't have to sit there and think 5 times before I bring it up. It should be hey, this is black and white, not okay. You're not allowed to do this anymore. And then the problem gets solved. And, it's, there aren't these just troves of women lying about sexual harassment. Like, nobody wants to have to report that. No one would willingly put themselves through that. So the circumstance where it's like, yeah, we need to investigate and, make sure we've got enough proof is probably the biggest piece of the problem that still exists, because it's like, I would never, falsely report something, because I would never put myself through that knowingly.
Right.
I would just never have that conversation. So the best thing you can do is just listen and not give anyone else the benefit of the doubt, and just be there to listen and support the women who are explaining to you that, like, this is a problem.
Right. Listen, I wouldn't mess with you anyways. You have 9 3D printers and an extensive design background and probably some creativity. The weapons and tools that you might come up with to defend yourself, I don't think that's a solid plan for anybody.
I cannot comment on that.
Yeah. You cannot confirm nor deny that you may be carrying weapons at trade shows. Yeah. Got it. So what's next for you?
This, just continuing to do what we're doing. This is, we're on the long-term track of how do we get 3D printing adopted and to become a big deal in manufacturing. Yeah. And, I'm living my dream life and my dream job here, getting to run this business, full of awesome, powerful, strong women, and, furthering the initiative of 3D printing and manufacturing as a whole. We just want to keep doing what we're doing. So, what's next for us is this.
Yeah.
As long as it takes.
Are you going to be at any of the upcoming shows, whether it's a Marimold or I can't even think what else is coming? Any of the plastics trade shows coming out? So,
like everyone's answer, it depends on the state of the world at that time. But our intention is to at least be at Rapid TCT in September.
Okay.
A 3D printing specific show. But our company intends to participate in MAP and MDM and Columbia Plast, I believe. But we have lots of upcoming events, and we're either going to be participating virtually or in person. But Rapid's in Chicago, so we'll be able to attend that in person for sure.
Are you coming out for that?
I live in Chicago.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh man.
There.
Yeah. Well, good. You should also stop by the Marimold event.
Is it in Chicago? I didn't know it was in Chicago.
Yeah, it's in Rosemont. So you have to drive a little bit, but that's in September 21st through the 23rd.
Nice. Okay. That's right before Rapid. So, I mean, if we're still able to go to Rapid, then I mean, we should be able to go to that. So we'll definitely be there if that's the case. I didn't realize it was in Chicago. Awesome.
Yeah, it's in Chicago. And then the day after, this is my little segue. The day after is our charity golf outing. And whether you golf or not, it could be a good time.
I'm terrible at golf. I once took paid lessons, and my instructor told me that maybe I should consider just walking around with the people playing instead of golfing myself.
That's an option. You can do that. You can drive the golf cart. You can run some games. You can give away some 3D printed tees. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. We just want to have as many people out there as possible. We're trying to raise money for iWarriors again this year. Oh, so iWarriors is an organization that donates iPads to combat wounded veterans to help with PTSD or just ways to communicate with their loved ones when they're in therapy or whatever they're doing. So that's our charity again this year. Our goal is 240 golfers, which is monumental. Last year we had 120 during COVID, and we think this year, backing up against a Marimold with a lot of people who are really, really ready to get back out and connect, we think we can make it happen. And so, if you want to register to be part of the golf outing, the address is below. It's just alliancelasersales.com/golf. We've got sponsorship opportunities and everything else, but it'd be awesome to have you out there. I think M Holland sponsored one year. I'm not sure who it came through, but yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great. I'll get you some of that information.
And we already have 3D printed tees, so we can work on that separately.
Sounds like, yeah, it sounds like a good plan. I like it. It makes me happy. And then maybe we'll see you at a Marimold. I mean, you could go out and peddle your stuff there and hand out some swag and do all the other good stuff.
No, that would be awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait to see more real people.
I know. People is a thing, right? Like I want to see people.
Yes.
So we have two laser. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I don't know why it comes to me now, but it does. It's the way my brain works. It's very disjointed. We have two 3D printers currently. Does the M Holland material, does that work on all 3D printers, or is it specific to certain brands? If we wanted to work with you guys, what does that look like?
So it does depend on the brand, but we work with open source 3D printers. So we do work a little bit with closed source 3D printers. They require that you buy the material from them and, all that stuff. Yep. But if you've got, a normal 3D printer that's, open platform, or, like we have EOS powders, we've got photopolymers, we got everything. Yep. There's probably something that we can do and be able to provide materials, and we can send you some pretty cool stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm going to pass your information on to my guy, Jeremy, and see if he's got some things that he might like help with, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple things. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email or LinkedIn. Absolute best way to get a hold of me.
Sure.
You can, and my email is on my LinkedIn. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I post all kinds of cool parts for printing too, of course. But that's the absolute best way. If you try to call me, I rarely answer my phone because I'm so tired of hearing about my car warranty. So.
Yeah. How about it? It's gotten ridiculous. It's even cars I don't even own anymore.
Yes. No.
And then how do people get involved with women in manufacturing? What do they need to do for that? Just contact you?
Well, yeah, so you can go on the website, the Women in Manufacturing website. Same with Women in 3D Printing. If you want to get involved in women in 3D printing in some way, H Freedman, Freedman is at mholland.com is my email. And that's the best way to get, involved in either of those. I can connect you with either a local chapter leader, or, sure, if you want to be a chapter leader, or, whatever it is. But yeah, just reach out to me and I'll get you whatever resources I possibly can.
Awesome. So we always wrap up, our show is all about positivity, optimism, and things like that. We always end our show with prayer requests. Do you have anything in your life right now that you would like prayers for?
The only thing I can think of is my grandmother passed away last Tuesday, and it's been really, really hard on, my dad and aunt and uncle. And that's about it, just support for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary Kate, did we have any other ones in the chats there? No, everybody's good. That's great. You asked for prayer requests and everybody's good. That means the world is better than people think it is.
Yeah, it can be sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna pray for us real quick, and then I will let you go about your day.
Okay.
So, Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for this technology that brings us together, that allows us to reach people that we normally wouldn't. Thank you for the new friendship with Haleyanne and all the people that were listening. And we just pray that you would give us all healing and strength, and allow us to feel your presence in the things that we're going through, whether that's personal loss with family members or jobs or whatever it is. We need you, and we want to have you in our lives, and we love you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Haleyanne, thank you. We made it work. It looked like it was going to be rough there for a little while. I'm not going to lie.
The camera stayed on.
Yeah, your camera stayed on the whole time once we got it figured out. So I think the moral to this story is the next time you come on, we're going to have to start like 2 hours beforehand and just make sure that everything works, because I think it just needed to warm up. But
Yeah.
you know, between the first time we tried getting through to now, I think it worked out. You know, if you're ever in the Northwest suburb area, we'd love to have you come by the shop and see what we're doing here. And maybe Mary Kate and I can come out and take a tour and see and do a video on 3D printing and what you guys are doing, and expand on the story a little bit.
No, that would be awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed, chatting with you today. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. That was Haleyanne Freedman and the Manufacturing Alliance podcast. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation and the show. And if you have any questions about any of the things that we talked about, whether it's 3D printing or how to get involved with women in manufacturing or women in 3D printing or anything like that, send us an email at Tony@alliancelasersales.com. And we'll be sure to get answers for you. And if you'd like to be on the show, send an email to the same thing. And we would love to have you on the show. We'd love to hear your story and the stories of the people that you work with, and how we can all do our part to help manufacturing grow in a real way that makes a difference for the world around us. So on behalf of myself, Alliance, Haleyanne, and everybody else, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care, and God bless.